Born in San Francisco, California, to parents that were unable to care for him, Steve Jobs' early life was a struggle for identity. He was an adopted child, raised by caring parents. One of the early wishes of his biological parents was academic success for Steve Jobs. However, young Steve Jobs was far from being an academic. Despite his immense intelligence, he wasn't interested in schooling, apart from a few select subjects. The teenage Steve, who was raised in Mountain View in the 1970s, was much more interested in pranking phone computers, creating innovative business ideas, and messing around with machinery with his close friend Steve Wozniak. Steve's approach to education has been explained very publicly. He only felt that he could really learn after he had dropped out of college. In 1976, when Jobs was just 21 years old, he and his partner Steve Wozniak started Apple Computer. The duo started in Steve Jobs' family garage, funding their entrepreneurial venture by Jobs selling his Volkswagen bus and Wozniak selling his beloved scientific calculator. Jobs and Wozniak are credited with revolutionizing the computer industry by democratizing the technology and making machines smaller, cheaper, intuitive, and accessible to everyday consumers. Wozniak conceived of a series of user-friendly personal computers, and with Jobs in charge of marketing, Apple initially marketed the computers for $666 each. Initial success with the Apple I pushed Jobs and Wozniak to create bigger and better computers, and by the late 1970s, they had created what would become Apple's first big success, the Apple II, a high-speed business workstation. The computer was a hit in their native California, and Jobs soon became a millionaire from the computer's heavy sales throughout the state and country. However, things turned sour for Jobs when he sought to expand Apple further, hiring former Pepsi chief executive John Sculley to lead Apple in a new direction. The experienced chief executive had no patience for Jobs' controversial and demanding management style, and after 2 years, they had no time for each other. In a boardroom meeting, Steve Jobs was fired from the company that he founded. His dismissal at Apple ignited a fire in Jobs, one that burned for the remainder of his career. Just a year later, he purchased a struggling animation studio from Star Wars mastermind George Lucas. It bled money for over 10 years, money that Jobs himself was spending on the studio, until it had a fantastic 1997 hit with the movie Toy Story. Likewise, he created another company and called it Next, which specialized in high-end workstations for the business community. However, it was a commercial failure, and Next bled money until it was purchased by Apple a decade later, bringing Steve Jobs back to the company that he built. Over the next few years, Jobs went from a small position at Apple to the company's interim CEO and eventually taking on the position full-time. Steve Jobs' second period at Apple produced many of the company's most successful devices. From the iPad to the iMac, the Jobs-led Apple went ahead of its previous milestones and grew into the biggest company in the technology sector. Although it took a heavy blow to set Jobs on the right path, his experience reflects a true genius and is regarded as the greatest second act in business history.